Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Alright, the second video here for this series. And as always, thank you for your suggestions. This one is definitely a weird suggestion. And sure enough, as the user mentioned, even though it's Bigfoot related, the fact that it's very interesting, very original, very fantastical. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that I look for. I just had to share it with everybody here because this is by far one of the most original, I guess, cryptid / monsters yet that I've discovered. Never heard of this particular cryptid before, but apparently others have, and it is a huge presence in the Philippines. In fact, it is probably their version of the Bigfoot here in the US. And what I'm talking about here is the cryptid known as the Kapre. It's actually spelled K-A-P-R-E, but apparently the way you say it is Kapre. Like take the words cup and then pray, combine them, and that's how you supposedly say it. And again, it's a Bigfoot-like monster, whatever cryptid, that's located in the Philippines and has been around for a long time. There are stories that it's apparently just one Kapre that exists in the Philippines, and there are stories that there are multiple, that there's like a whole race of these beings there in the Philippines. But in any case, they have been around since at least the 15th century. That's the first reported sighting, so we're talking a good couple hundred years when it comes to this existence. So you would have to go in the Philippines specifically towards a mountain called Mount Makiling. That is apparently the location of the Kapre. But even if you were to try to go on, let's say, a sightseeing tour, let's say you gathered up some good amount of funds and you decided to take some time off and you don't wanted to go there specifically to try to hunt or look at this particular cryptid, you're gonna have a long shot. And the reason for it is this: apparently the Kapre can exist for so long in the Philippines with humans there and interact with them in some ways over these hundreds of years, because its main resource is its invisibility. And the reason for it is as follows. First, let me give a brief description of what the Kapre is, and you'll see various images of them here. There are people there in the Philippines that have openly cited the Kapre, despite the fact that its main protection is its invisibility. It's all tied to the fact that it's invisible because of a special belt that the Kapre wears. This belt is supposed to give it some kind of invisibility cloak or some kind of invisibility factor to humans, but it's not all proof, because there are several ways for someone to still see the Kapre, and they are as follows. Apparently, if you come across a Kapre and you become its friend, then you'll be able to see it. How you become its friend, I don't know, but apparently that's the notion. The other way is if the Kapre develops a love interest, especially towards a woman, then it becomes visible to that person, to the woman, as a way of trying to interact with the woman. And then the other way is if you were to apparently sit on a Kapre, kind of like a like you would on, say, Santa Claus or something along those lines, then you would see it, and anyone else around you would see the Kapre, because maybe just, human interaction allows the Kapre to suddenly become visible, even with that magical belt that it wears. Now, let's talk about the Kapre itself and how it looks like. I mean, you've seen various pictures of it here, and apparently it's not like, when I say Bigfoot, it's not like the huge hairy beast that you and I think of here in the US. It is, but it isn't. It is larger than your average human being. In fact, it's been described as being 9, 10, 11 feet, sometimes even larger than that. It does have hair over all of its body, but it retains a more of a humanoid look to it than, say, Bigfoot is. More along the lines of Bigfoot is more like an animal, while the Kapre is more of like just a larger human that happens to be hairy, if you can catch the difference. And when it comes to another human-like factor, it wears a loin cloth to cover its privates. So it shows that it has more of a humanistic approach than, say, a Bigfoot. Also, the Kapre, again with that magical belt, has something else tied to it. It's apparently some kind of stone of some sort, a magical white stone that it carries. And the idea behind it is who knows? I mean, it's supposed to grant its longevity or whatever, but should you ever happen to come across this stone and hold it, then you can apparently make the Kapre grant you wishes. Not that it's necessarily going to give this stone outright to people, but if somehow you become in the possession of it, then you have basically a genie at your disposal. Now, when it comes to the Kapre and its human interaction, it's actually not quite evil, although there have been apparently tales tied to the Kapre stealing women from the villages. Nothing really concrete has come about with regards to it. In fact, it seems to be just more of like a benevolent type entity, just something that likes to hang around in trees. Trees are, by the way, its main dwelling. That's its whole existence, pretty much. It lives, again, near and around those mountains, the Mount Mechling, but it has most of its dwelling time spent in trees. It just lounges in trees, and its most humanistic action is it likes to smoke. It likes to smoke cigars, or it likes to smoke something that resembles what you and I would think of a cigar. So basically, it just likes to lie in trees, and then it likes to see probably humans from afar, kind of like people watch is the closest thing that came up to mind whenever I was reading information about the Kapre. And then that's it. It just likes to have that calm, relaxed demeanor. The closest thing that it has to anything involving bad characteristics is it apparently likes to make people confused, because the smell that either comes from that cigar or the smell from its own body seems to disorient people. In fact, there's a popular saying there in the Philippines that if suddenly you're in familiar surroundings, like let's say you're at home, or let's say you're in the park, or let's say you're at work, wherever you might be, but suddenly things seem disorienting, like you're suddenly thinking, where am I? Why does this place seem out of touch? Like, why is it I don't recognize this place, even though this is a place that you've been to many times before? People cite it to the fact that a Kapre must be nearby, and that its smell, again, either coming from the cigarette that it has or coming from its own stench, is causing this confusion. And so when people snap out of it, that's when someone says, oh, you must have had a Kapre nearby, and then they just leave it at that. It's become so popular, in fact, that's like they're kind of like here in the U.S. when people say, oh, I must have had a brain fart or a blonde moment, something along those lines. The Philippines, they associate that to the Kapre. Also, what's interesting to note is that the Kapre can interact with humans, and in fact, it's known more of like it's kind of hard to put in words, but think of it like it interacts with humans because it likes what humans can give to it. In fact, apparently for all these hundreds of years, the Kapre interacts with humans much like a wild cat would, like a wild, not like an actual like cheetah or anything like that, but just like your average cat that you and I see at home. But imagine one that's stray. It would approach humans because it likes the fact that humans can give it food. Such is the concept, the same thing with the Kapre. And what I mean is this. There's this great website, by the way, that's called BigfootEncounters.com, and I'll include a link for it below. But the author of that article was in the Philippines, and they were interviewing various people. And they specifically talked to one woman who has apparently, had generations of family members who have seen Kapre and interacted with them. And she said that her grandmother loved to cook for the Kapre because one of their things, again, having been close to humans for hundreds of years, they do this because they like humans in turn respecting them. And that respect comes from the form of the humans giving them food, leaving them food, in other words. This is what she said. She said, we must respect the Kapre's right to be here, and he will not harm us. The creature comes in at night, and if we give him great respect, the Kapre will leave fresh fish in place of cooked rice left out for them, and sometimes fruit from the mountain rainforest. My grandmother prepares cooked coconut and rice because she says that they like sweet fruits, and especially the tamarind fruit, papaya, mangoes, and bananas. If it is sweetened with ground cane sugar, they leave many fishes and more fruit. And grandmother says these creatures are people-oriented, and it's their way of quote-unquote begging for more. The pans are lit clean and left in the same place. So you see what I mean? Like when I was saying earlier, they're a lot like stray cats of sorts that if there's population of humans nearby, those stray cats eventually learn that if they interact with the humans and the humans are more than likely to like leave some kind of food, then they'll just keep continuing that cycle. And in turn, it's interesting to note that the Kapre, just as that grandmother described, they in turn leave other kinds of foods to the humans. Apparently the Kapre do this because while the Kapre can, hunt for their own fish and hunt for their own food, it's probably something that only humans can do when it comes to making like delicate sugary food or certain cooked food that the Kapre, for whatever reasons, cannot. So it's kind of like a good symbiotic relationship. So with the Kapre, again, the most dominant factor from them seems to be that they are invisible, but here are some telltale signs of when a Kapre is nearby. So if you're in the Philippines and you suddenly start smelling smoke where smoke should be nowhere around, like let's say you're out in the fields in the Philippines, or let's say you're coming up on some trees, nobody else nearby, there's nothing that like a fire or nothing else in terms of a factory, anything that could be creating the smoke, but you are smelling it, then supposedly there's a Kapre nearby. Again, because those things are invisible, you cannot see them unless those factors that I mentioned earlier are available. But if you smell that smoke, then that's when you have a good chance a Kapre is nearby. Another one is if you have a strong stench, like a strong potent stench coming from some nearby trees, and it's not the usual stench like one would expect, like a rotting carcass or let's say something decaying. No, but instead something that it could be only 100% unmistakable coming from something that hasn't been washed in a long time. That BO, in other words, that we commonly associate when on our run-ins with some people. If you smell that there in the forest, and again there's no sign of anything nearby that could permeate that scent, then chances are you have a Kapre nearby too. Another way would be if there's a strong rustling of tree branches near and around your area. Say suddenly you hear something large moving through some tree branches and you're looking up, but you see nothing, but you see the branches move, but you don't see what could cause it. And then there's certainly no wind causing it because it's not hitting you, like there's no large gust of wind in and around your area, then again chances are you have a Kapre as well. Another thing, it's a little bit more eerie on this case, but two things that stand out are if you suddenly hear some loud laughter coming from something that's completely unseen, and again you know that there's nothing in and around your area that could cause it. It's not your friend nearby, it's not anybody else, you're just by yourself, and yet you hear some loud laughter, then that's it. Another one is if you see big fiery red eyes at nighttime coming from a tree, and let's say that those eyes are looking at you, they know that you're there and vice versa, and you know that you're the only person there presumably, then again it could be coming from a Kapre. And then another way is if you have a strong visible sign of smoke coming from a tree, but it's not caused by a fire, instead it's just coming from some location in the tree, but there's nothing that you could tell that's presumably causing that smoke to come out. Instead it's just coming from an invisible point. Again, that could be the Kapre just sitting there calmly on the tree, probably observing you, but whatever it's doing, it's smoking that cigar-like fixture. And then finally, another way is if there's an abundant amount of fireflies in and around an area, and it looks highly unusual. Say suddenly you see a swarm of fireflies, and normally where fireflies, they disperse when you're coming about, or they just go about their cycle flying in and out of areas, but instead you see a big group of fireflies just swarming an area, It's supposedly because the Kapre is right there, and that cigarette or cigar that the Kapre smokes, it attracts these fireflies to it. Then if you see that, then again you're near and around a Kapre as well. So pretty fascinating stuff. No, what do you guys think? The Kapre, again, not really something that's evil, not really something that's like malevolent. It's just an entity that just seems to like just hanging around. Just its whole existence is just to dwell on trees, watch, and in some cases interact with the humans that are there. The only loose descriptions tied to the Kapre again are it's Bigfoot related, but it's more human-like. Skin on, hairy skin. Just the loincloth, the magical belt that is supposed to make it invisible oftentimes. And then the interactions with the Kapres dating hundreds and hundreds of years, even to the most locals today, in other words, stating that even to this day they leave food out for the Kapre. The Kapre rewards them with having some kind of fish available to them, or they just bring back the pan, and the pan is completely licked clean. Then again, more interactions, more activities tied to the Kapre. But that's about it. That's all the info. If anyone has anything else tied to the Kapre there and around the Philippines area, please, post your comments, share them below. It'll be fascinating to see if anyone has actually seen one, or if anyone knows of somebody that interacted with one. It's supposed to be, again, a creature that just isn't around the area, although it is a little creepy to think that at the end of the day, as you saw in one of those images, a Kapre could be just hanging around, let's say a park, just leaning against a giant tree, or let's say it could be just walking up casually between streets, between buildings, and you would never know unless one of those aforementioned factors I had stated earlier, because of its invisibility. It does make it seem a little eerie that something so large could exist in this world, and at the same time people be so clueless about its existence unless somebody was able to do those three things that I had mentioned earlier. Very creepy stuff, but very interesting nonetheless. But yeah, if anyone has any other stories tied to the Kapre, please, if you soon see, post them, share them below. So, alright everybody, thanks again as always, take care.